Good evening. I am Mary Dixon, President of the League of Women Voters of Glendale, Burbank, and I am pleased to welcome you to our forum this evening. As we begin our evening of democracy in action, let us start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization formed in 1920 after women won the right to vote. The League encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, and membership is open to any person who subscribes to our purpose and policy of the League. We are strong supporters of the election process, and we join the cities of Burbank and Glendale in encouraging voters to not only vote themselves, but to reach out to family members and to their neighbors to encourage them to vote as well. For the November 8th election, the deadline for registering to vote or changing your registration is Monday, October 24th. Tonight's candidate forum rules call for adherence to the terms of civil discourse by both candidates and the public. The hallmark of democracy is the willingness of all members of our community to treat each other with courtesy and respect, not just the people we agree with. It is in that spirit that we are here this evening to engage in a vital part of our democratic process, a civilized discussion of the important issues that confront our communities. So I want to thank both candidates and the audience for being here tonight and for their willingness to elevate the discussion to enhance understanding rather than to obfuscate or denigrate their opponent. The questions you will be hearing tonight are questions we have received from the public. We hope the candidates will find these questions to be challenging and enabling you, the voters, to learn about the candidates and to make an informed decision in the election. And finally, we want to thank those who have made this forum possible. First, we thank the City of Glendale for providing the facilities for this forum. We are particularly grateful for the assistance of Brian Halloran, broadcast coordinator, and his staff. We have many of our League members here tonight working to make this forum happen. Included are Susan Halgren and Wendy. We're our audience greeters, our question sorters, Renee Lesk and Chris Carson, and our timekeepers, Tom and Tammy. And now I would like to introduce our moderator for this forum, Rita Zvern. Rita is a longtime League member with much experience in moderating forums. We are grateful to Rita for the many hours that she devotes to the League. Rita?
Thanks, Mary. Good evening, and welcome to the candidate forum for the 43rd Assembly District. This forum will be broadcast live this evening and then at various times until the election date on the Glendale, Glendale TV Channel 6. No reproduction or rebroadcast of this forum may be made without the prior written consent of the League of Women Voters and the City of Glendale. No digital or other forms of photography or recording are permitted in these chambers during the forum. The audience here tonight is invited to submit written questions for the candidates. Please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, and one of the monitors will provide you with a card and pencil. Questions will be collected only during the opening statements and the first questions. We would request that the audience turn off all cell phones and pagers and that they refrain from applauding or otherwise disrupting the forum. If a candidate's supporters are disruptive during another candidate's remarks, the other candidate will be given additional time to compensate for the interruption. Additionally, attacks of a personal nature, including private matters having no bearing on a candidate's public persona, or ability to perform the duties of the office in a competent, ethical manner will not be tolerated. If a candidate makes a personal attack during his or her remarks, the time required for me to interrupt the candidate and remind him of the rule will be taken from his own speaking time. The two candidates for the 43rd Assembly District are, in alphabetical order by last name, Laura Friedman, Artie Kasakian. Each candidate will be allowed 1 minute for an opening statement, after which there will be a series of 10 questions during the forum. The first question will be addressed to candidate number 1 on the dais, who will have 3 minutes to respond. Candidate number 2 will then have 2 minutes to respond to the same question. The second candidate question will be addressed first to candidate number 2, who will have 3 minutes to respond, followed by a 2-minute response by candidate number 1, and so on, so that each candidate will have the same amount of time to speak. Following the question period, the candidates will be given 2 minutes each for a closing statement. During these responses, our timekeepers will alert candidates to the time remaining with signs of 1 minute, 30 seconds, and then a stop sign when they are out of time. We'll now begin with opening statements. Ms. Friedman, your opening statement, please.
Thank you. I'd like to first thank the League for hosting this event. I was raised by a single mother who was active in the women's movement. I never thought that I'd be an activist like my mother. I spent 20 years working as an executive in the entertainment industry, and I'm now a small business owner. But now that I'm a mom, I find myself following in my mother's footsteps. I got involved in local politics out of an interest in historic preservation and a concern for neighborhood issues. I was elected to the Glendale City Council in 2009 and served as its mayor. As a member of the council, I've learned how to listen, forge consensus, and bring diverse communities together to solve common problems. I'm proud of my work to attract good jobs, to fund the arts, create new parkland, enact strong environmental protections, provide more affordable housing, and strengthen our city's fiscal position. These are some of the issues that I want to work on in Sacramento. I have spent 9 years now working in different positions within the city and leadership positions, and I know how to work with the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kasakian, your opening statement, please.
I want to thank the League for organizing this forum, as well as everyone who is here and not watching the Dodgers game for the playoffs. My name is Artie Kasakian, and I hope to earn your vote to be our next Assembly member. For the last 11 years, I have worked as the elected city clerk in the city of Glendale in one of the most important positions, making government more transparent and accessible to the public it's supposed to serve, and making the polls more accessible to more voters than ever before. Now, as a city clerk, I have a deep understanding of how government works, why it doesn't work, and what we can do as voters to make it functional when it seems most dysfunctional, as it seems to today in Sacramento. During my years of service, I've worked to increase filming jobs and stop runaway production, to leave the state and the region, leading efforts to make elections and government more transparent. And I've worked with community groups to build consensus and to get things done. And I want to continue serving as your state representative. But more important than being a city clerk and being a public servant, I'm here today as a father, as a neighbor, and as a resident who wants to share the issues with me.
We will now begin the question period. The first question is directed to Ms. Friedman. What do you see as the most urgent needs of the 43rd Assembly District, and how do you believe they should be addressed? Please explain.
Thanks.
Your 3-minute response, please.
First, I would say homelessness and housing costs. We have a situation in this district where housing costs continue to rise, and we see more and more people becoming homeless. Our largest group that is facing homelessness right now are single women over the age of 60, and that's a real tragedy. We have a situation where rents are rising, sometimes astronomically, and jobs are not keeping up with people's ability to pay those rents. We have people who are paying more than half their income sometimes on their rent, and this is becoming a huge crisis in the district. Secondly, I'd say that making sure that we can continue to provide high-quality, good-paying jobs in the district, and making sure that we're properly preparing people for the jobs of the future by investing in our community college system and our state college system so that we can give people the diplomas and the background that they need to succeed is incredibly important. And lastly, I think growth is going to be a huge challenge in Southern California. We don't have the public transportation infrastructure to keep up with the amount of growth that we have. We don't have the housing stock to also keep up with growth that's natural just from childbirth and people living longer. We're not even talking about people that are moving into Southern California for work, which there are a lot of, but we have a lot of people leaving as well. We have a growing population simply because people are having children, those children are living, which is a good thing, and we're all living longer. And we're going to have to figure out where these people are going to live, how they're going to be able to stay in our community, and whether we're going to have enough jobs for all of the people that need employment.
Thank you. Mr. Kasakian, your 2-minute response, please.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that Councilwoman Friedman is bringing up some of these issues, and some of them, it's the first time I'm hearing about them from her, because it's what I've been talking about for the last year as I've been going door to door talking to voters about the issues that are most important to them. Traffic congestion, overdevelopment, crippling student loan debt, a weak job market, and increasing crime. These are quality of life issues that impact us all, that unfortunately are a result of the overdevelopment that has occurred right here in specifically Glendale, where the councilwoman has been serving for the last 7 years. Almost every project in the downtown, if not every single project that has come before her, she has voted for, which has driven up the cost of rents. And now Glendale is one of the most expensive places to live in the county. So we need to make sure that we do have affordable housing, that, you know, the veterans in our communities who serve our country with distinction and honor don't come back and have to sleep on the streets, that we have job training available for our young college graduates, and making sure that they're not graduating with college debt that's crippling, and then they spend the rest of their lives trying to figure out how to pay back. These are the most important issues that have been a part of my platform. I've been talking about the state of public education and the cuts that we've been making in public education. We should not have to have parent foundations that are trying to raise money to pay for teachers' salaries in one of the wealthiest states in the wealthiest country in the world. We need to make sure that we're properly funding public education, creating jobs, having a sustainable local economy, and making sure that we have affordable housing so families can stay in this community instead of leaving for states like Nevada, Texas, and elsewhere.
Thank you. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Kasakian. What plans would you pursue to address the underfunded condition of our state's public employee retirement benefits?
Well, we do have a pension system that provides individuals who spend a career in public service with the ability to retire in dignity. Now, there was an article in the Los Angeles Times that accurately portrayed the events that transpired that caused for some of the costs of this to run away. And part of what the costs that led to this, the runaway costs that we're now obligated to pay as taxpayers, was a crash in one of the worst economic recessions, over projections, and councils that were voting for contracts that could far exceed the means by which we could pay them. One of the ways we need to figure out how to pay them is to find out more revenue. Where can we get more revenue in the state of California into our state coffers? We need to cut waste. We need to make sure that when we do bargain with our unions that do provide the services for us, that they're at the table, and what we provide them in terms of a promise is realistic and not based on what other cities are providing to their employees. Unfortunately, that's one of the issues that we've been struggling with here in Glendale, and I've seen how it has impacted individuals who spend a career here working in the city and after retirement have to go find a second job to pay for their family's health insurance. So what we need to do is make sure that we cut waste in government, that we find new areas of revenue generation. You know, one of the areas can be, you know, finding a new way how we tax an oil. As people drive more electric cars and more hybrid vehicles, we're going to have to figure out a way where we can get money to repair our roads. And where that money comes from takes away from the pension obligations that we have. But we need to also figure out how we sit down with our unions and negotiate with them a fair agreement that allows individuals who have spent a career in public service to retire with dignity.
Thank you. Ms. Friedman, your 2-minute response, please.
Well, I've been on the City Council since 2009, and I came in during the recession, and dealing with the unfunded liabilities that were left to the council that were done in the boom years for promises that were made to employees that then became almost impossible to pay has been something that my council has been dealing with for many years now. And we have really been the leader regionally in making sure that we do common sense pension reform in this city. We've done it in most cases with the cooperation of our employee groups, by showing them that we are a fiscally conservative city, that we're well-run, that we are willing to trim all of the fat that we need to trim, and then working with them to make sure that their benefits and their pensions and their salaries are sustainable and fair at the same time. It's not always easy to do. Sometimes you have to say no. Sometimes it leads to disagreements. But when you're the guardian of the taxpayers' money, you have to be willing to be fiscally responsible and to make those sound choices. Glendale's been a leader in doing that, and we've gotten some criticism from some employee groups for doing it, but our employees know that what we've done for the welfare and of all of the employees and for the taxpayers that we serve. I'm proud that our largest employee group, the Glendale City Employee Association, is endorsing me in this campaign. It hasn't always been an easy road, but they recognize the work that we've done. We have to be willing at the state level to make those kinds of decisions, to work with our employee groups to make sure that whatever promise that they're given is realistic and is not going to burden taxpayers down the road.
Thank you. Mr. Kasakian, your 2-minute response, please. Oh, excuse me, that was question 3 goes to Ms. Friedman, excuse me. How should the legislature work toward enhancing the state's justice system so as to provide adequate and timely justice for our residents and businesses? Your 3-minute response, please.
Well, we have to make sure that we adequately fund our court system. I mean, this is the system that we have to make sure that the public is able to resolve issues before things blow up, particularly in the civil court system. We also have to make sure that people who are accused of crimes have their day in court sooner rather than later. Nobody should have to spend time in prison or with the threat of prison hanging over their head for months and years before they get their day in court. Now, I was glad to see a few years ago that enough revenue came back into the state that a lot of the threatened closures of courthouses around California didn't have to happen. We've got a courthouse across the street that was threatened with closure. That would have meant that people from this entire area who wanted to have a civil case heard would have had to go all the way out into the Inland Empire to do that, and that could take, that would have overburdened the court system to where those cases could have taken twice the amount of time to be resolved. So we have to make sure that that's a priority because the court system is really what makes our democracy work. It's the only access that people have a lot of times to seeking justice against employers who might commit wage theft, against individuals who have wronged them, and against corporations so that they can be held accountable.
Thank you. Mr. Kasakian, your 2-minute response, please.
Would you please
repeat the question?
Yes,
certainly. How should the legislature work toward enhancing the state's justice system so as to provide adequate and timely justice for our residents and businesses?
Well, it's certainly, I think, no mystery to anyone who works in the legal system that a few years back when there was cutbacks being made all over the state, it would take individuals a very long time to get their day in court, as we say. And obviously refunding and making sure that some of the funds that were cut is restored is critical and crucial to that. But most importantly, we look at, in terms of what is taking up a lot of time in the court system, besides the businesses and the individual litigation, our courts are overburdened right now with a lot of the recidivism that has occurred with individuals who have gone to prison and are now going back after they got out. We have one of the highest recidivism rates in the country. We have individuals who serve their time and when they come out end up going back into prison for crimes that they commit again. So we need to invest in programs that reduce the amount of time that people, if someone has served their time and is now ready to reintegrate into society, they need the tools to be able to do that, and we need to have those programs available to them. In the court system, I'd like to see more investment in public defense. We need to see more investment in the individuals that are actually making the decisions. We need to have judges and we need to have courts that function in a more timely, efficient manner. And I am glad that the courthouse here in Glendale remained open, but we need to upgrade the courthouse here in Glendale. It cannot right now handle the workload that it has.
Thank you. The next question is directed first to Mr. Kasakian. Are existing state programs aimed at keeping jobs in California, including entertainment jobs, actually effective? What other types of programs would you pursue? Your 3-minute response, please.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I'm glad you talked about the entertainment industry because over 30 years ago when my family moved here to the 43rd Assembly District, when we settled here in Glendale and decided to make this our home where my parents raised their family, I saw the aeronautics industry leaving this region, and everyone said that it would come back, and it did not. And with it, it took some very high-quality, high-paying jobs. And I saw friends of mine who were forced to relocate and individuals who were just close to retirement having to retrain and find new jobs. And when I began my service here at City Hall as the city clerk, one of the jobs that I wanted to do, one of the tasks that I wanted to accomplish was make sure that we did not lose any more critical entertainment industry jobs to outside the state. And so what I did is to make sure that it was easier for people to get a filming permit. We were able over the last 11 years to increase the number of filmings that were taking place in Glendale, and we have been able to keep those jobs local. Now, in order to keep other jobs here, we need to focus on light manufacturing. We need to make sure that we have the vocational programs both in our high schools and in our community colleges, so the industries that are growing, whether it's tech or elsewhere, have the workforce that they need to rely on in order to compete in a global market. Those are the things that I'd like to do, incentivize tech industries to remain here in the 43rd Assembly District. We have the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We have Caltech just outside of our district. We have tremendous resources that we can rely on, and we need to make sure that the jobs of the future are here today. That means investing in our high schools, investing even in our middle schools, and most importantly, investing in our community colleges, which are really important parts of this district in terms of a resource for creating jobs and keeping jobs here.
Thank you. Ms. Friedman, your 2-minute response, please.
Thank you. We need to reduce costs for companies, and we need to reduce red tape. Workers' compensation can cost employers 50 cents on the dollar, depending on the type of business that you have. We need to make sure that every dime that's paid to workers' comp is really accounted for. We haven't recalculated workers' comp since the Affordable Care Act to make sure that that money is really shouldn't be going instead to insurance rather than into workers' compensation. These are the reasons why so many people work in the underground economy in California. By some statistic, 1 out of 5 employees is working completely illegally. And sometimes the employers want to have those people working legally. They just can't afford to pay the cost to do it, because on top of their payroll, they're paying a lot of money in workers' compensation, a lot of money in state fees, a lot of money dealing with regulations. We have to make sure, of course, that every company that exists in California is following environmental rules. One of the reasons that we did lose some of the aerospace industry is because they were polluting companies and they wanted to move to states like Texas that didn't have such strong environmental regulations. I don't support weakening those, but we need to turn our state culture into a culture that says, if you're a business that's not polluting, if you're providing the type of jobs that we want, we're going to find a way to have you in California, which means cutting red tape and getting them to a yes and into a place where their business is permitted, rather than throwing up roadblock after roadblock and making it difficult for them to operate. I've been doing a lot of work on economic development in Glendale doing just that. We've managed to get rid of our lengthy variance process and move instead to a process whereby business owners could get over-the-counter permission to do things that in the past would have taken them months and months and months, sometimes years, and in many cases to be able to do things that they wouldn't have been able to do at all because of the type of variance process that we had. If we were able to do it at the local level, and we've been very successful doing it, we can do it at the state level. It's my work in economic development that's gotten me in the endorsement of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, of the heads of the Valley Business Association, and of BizFed, because I've worked doing exactly this at the local level.
Thank you. The next question is directed to Ms. Friedman. What programs would you prioritize for improving mass transit and other alternatives to the use of automobiles in our cities? Your 3-minute response, please.
Well, when I got elected to City Council, I gave up my car for 2 years, and I rode my bike around, I walked, and I took the bus, because I wanted to know what it was like for people who didn't want to be car-reliant in Glendale. And it was really eye-opening. For one thing, I realized that as frightening as it can be to walk and bike around Glendale, it's certainly possible. The hardest thing was going uphill into the hills. But we need to make sure that we make our roads safer for all users, so that we give people a feeling of safety and encourage them to get out of their cars and use other mobilities. Most of people's car trips are under 2 miles. For a lot of us, we can do that on foot, we can do it with local buses, and we can do it with our bicycles. So we need to make that investment. We also have to invest in light rail, which is something that people love. The Expo line is successful beyond even what they thought it was going to be. People love the Red Line. I'd love to have light rail in Glendale, and it's something that we've been working towards. We need to have a robust public transportation system all around Los Angeles, and we need to make sure that our buses are convenient and easy to access. This is something that people are really hungry for at this point, particularly the millennials. We also have to make sure that our growth patterns really favor building new housing near job centers, not sprawling out into what's now open space and forcing people to drive in on California's highways. We need to add housing near our job centers and near public transportation so that people can live in a way where it's easy for them to take public transportation to work, to shop, and to eat and enjoy themselves. What's happening in downtown Glendale with having new housing in our downtown is really a way of us allowing growth while protecting our older neighborhoods and while protecting our open space. We're adding housing in our downtown because we have 65,000 people a day commute into our downtown. By giving those people a chance to live where they can walk to their job centers, you take cars off the road, you don't add cars. And if we're going to grow, if we don't want our housing prices to look like San Francisco's housing prices and the housing prices in hot job markets where they have not increased their housing stock, we're going to have to add some housing. I totally reject the idea that housing prices go up when you add new housing. That just doesn't make any sense. We haven't added single-family housing in Glendale, single-family houses, and yet those prices have almost doubled in the last 10, 15 years. So it's not about building more, it's simply about supply and demand. If you add new housing, you need to do it in a way that that's sustainable, and that's by adding housing near your existing job centers. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kasakian, your 2-minute response, please.
Well, first of all, we do need to increase the frequency of when our buses run, how often, and where they travel to. We need to enhance light rail and make sure that it's accessible. You know, one of the great things about the light rail system in Los Angeles is that it's now servicing record numbers of passengers, but it still doesn't reach the 43rd Assembly District, and we need to make sure that it does, that we have the light rail coming up into our places where people work and they live and they can travel to downtown and back. I'll tell you one thing that's important to me is also making sure that we invest in individuals, in infrastructure, and individuals who wish to eliminate polluting vehicles from our streets. You know, we have a lot of people who are now driving electric cars, a lot more than we did 5 or 10 years ago. Let's make sure that we have the infrastructure to support those. But in terms of the bus frequency that Councilwoman Friedman talks about, I challenge anyone to walk out of here tonight or to walk anywhere in Glendale and find a single bus stop in Glendale with an actual bus schedule posted. You will not find one, because I've been waiting for 7 years to have one posted in Glendale, and it hasn't happened, and we'll probably wait for another year until Councilwoman Friedman gets around to it. You know, people don't know when the buses run. They don't know how frequently they run. It's an inconvenient mode of transportation as opposed to the at-your-fingertips automobiles. If we want to get people out of their cars and into public transit systems, we have to make it easily accessible to them.
Thank you. The next question will be directed first to Mr. Kasakian. The entire state is experiencing a housing crisis. While developers continue to build high-end housing with a smattering of units affordable to those at or below 60% of adjusted median income, and little is done to address the needs of those in the 60 to 120% AMI range, who also struggle to find or hold on to decent housing, what strategies would you propose to halt the escalation of housing and land costs in the wake of unit and single-family home flipping? Your 3-minute response, please.
Well, there was a lot in that question. But let me first start off by what I'm experiencing here, and I know a lot of people are experiencing when they either come to visit in Glendale or who are driving through downtown. And in terms of transportation and traffic, you can see that the development has caused congestion. I know, because I grew up in the city and I knew how long it would take to drive from one end to the other and how long it takes me today just to travel a few blocks through the stucco Grand Canyon of Central Avenue and Brand. And what we're seeing is that indeed the cost of housing around the downtown and elsewhere has gone up because of the overdevelopment. And what is unfortunate is that there hasn't been an effort to have more affordable housing in those units. One thing I'd like to see done in the legislature is to ensure that when a development is within a certain radius of a public amenity like a park, a library, or a school, that the threshold for affordable housing units in that development is much higher than it is right now. And in the recent statistics, I actually asked, and what I received today was that less than 5% of the units that have come into downtown are actually affordable. So when you see those large buildings going up with dark windows at night, who are supposedly the people that are going to be working in these jobs that Ms. Friedman keeps talking about that I haven't seen, remember that we need to make sure that the developers who come here, who overdevelop the downtown, are providing housing that is not just affordable, but affordable to the people who live here and who want to live here and work here.
Thank you. Ms. Friedman, your 2-minute response, please.
Well, in Glendale, we've entitled, since I've been on council, about 4,000 apartment units. We've built, out of those, 500 permanent affordable housing units. I think that's a pretty good amount. We just opened Veterans Village, just down the road from this city hall, which is affordable units for returning veterans. We have an affordable project under construction about 4 blocks away from here next to the YMCA. We're one of the most aggressive cities when it comes to affordable housing, and I've been proud to have been very supportive of all of those affordable housing units. In addition, the new market rate housing that's done privately, we don't build those are privately built. A lot of those take advantage of incentives that we give them to build both greener buildings and also to include affordable units within those buildings. That's really one of the only ways that we have to compel those, to encourage those developers to include affordable units. Every single study that's out there, and there are multiple studies on this, every single study says that when you create housing, even if it's luxury housing, even if it's housing that I could not afford and you couldn't afford, that still relieves the pressure downstream as people that can afford those units move up from more moderately priced units and older units into those buildings. It starts to relieve the pressure because housing prices are supply and demand. It's as simple as that. If you bring more housing online, you ultimately end up reducing some of the demand on the older, more affordable units. The problem that we have in lots of parts of the district is not so much building new housing. The problem is that they're destroying older, affordable buildings to do it. And that's really the problem, and that's what we have to stop, is the displacement of people out of affordable units to replace them with luxury housing. In Glendale, we haven't done that because we have changed the zoning in our downtown to encourage housing in areas that never allowed housing in the past. So you're seeing housing come in at sites that used to be retail and office. And that's a more sensible way of doing it.
Thank you. The next question is directed to Ms. Friedman. What are your specific plans to increase funding for California public schools? Your 3-minute response, please.
Well, we need to stop funding the schools to the statutory minimum that's required by law and fund them to the need. California is still at the very bottom of the nation when it comes to funding per capita. So we have to make sure that whatever resources are really need to educate our students, we put the resources there. Now, I'm a product of public education. My daughter will go to public schools as well. I'm extremely passionate about making sure that the public school system is excellent and accessible to everybody, not just in our district, but statewide. And unfortunately, we still have situations where some school districts struggle while others offer an excellent education. And that's unfair because, of course, the schools that struggle the most tend to be schools that are in economically disadvantaged neighborhoods. My best friend teaches in the city of San Fernando. She does it because she's multilingual and wants to work with kids who are really the most economically disadvantaged kids in the surrounding area. And her school is incredibly under-resourced. She had to fix a broken window in her school herself after hours on a ladder, and that is outrageous. We have got to do better than that. We have to make sure that our education dollars are going into the classroom, into students, not to overhead, not to bloated executive layers, but to put it right back into the classroom and to allow our teachers to do what they do best, and that's teach, and to make sure they have the resources to teach. My friend also has to go and buy materials for her class every single week. She shouldn't have to do that. That should be provided for her and for her students. So we have to make sure that education is a priority. This is what's going to power our nation as an economic superpower. It's having a workforce and having a population that is highly educated. That's the only way that we're going to compete in a global marketplace, is by having the brightest students, the best educated students, students who are taught not just math and science, but also taught the arts and taught how to be creative. And that is the best investment that we can make. It'll pay back in terms of our national economy, and it'll certainly pay back in terms of having an educated population that cares about its civic leaders and cares about putting back into the state.
Thank you. Mr. Kasakian, your 2-minute response, please.
Thank you. Well, as a product of the local public education system and a product of the public university system in California, I'm very passionate about this because I know that people succeed when our schools succeed. I've seen that. My mother's been a public school teacher, a classroom teacher in Glendale Unified for almost 30 years. And it's absolutely critical that we increase the funding. Proposition 98, which was supposed to lock in the funding for our schools, was intended to be the floor, not the ceiling. And unfortunately, the perception is that the schools have enough, and including my opponent who believes that they're bloated executive layers, when we're actually tasking our school administrators with more and more testing requirements and giving them less and less resources by which they can actually do their jobs. What really the issue is making sure that we're investing in public education, not taking money, tax dollars away from them to put them in privately run charter schools or schools that are run by corporations. That is what's happening right now in California. The Washington Post did an article on it. National Public Radio has done a series about how the California Charter School Association has been investing heavily in candidates like my opponent, who has received $1.8 million in assistance to her campaign advocating on her behalf in this race. And what their goal is to make sure that private companies are able to run schools on California taxpayer dollars. That is a fact. You can look it up on the Fair Political Practices Commission website. And what we need to do is make sure that public schools are run by public funds, that we invest in them. And the way that we increase funding is allowing local communities to be able to tax themselves through a parcel tax, which is now at a very high threshold of 67%. If we can pass an initiative that would lower that to 55%, like we did with school construction bond measures, we will see a lot more money coming into our local schools. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is directed to Mr. Kasakian. The Otis report on the creative economy, published in 2015, shows that nearly 1.5 million jobs in California are supported by the creative industries, and that the industry generates nearly $293 billion in economic output. That is direct, indirect, and induced. What would you propose to ensure that this economy continues to thrive and that residents of all means have access to arts in school and the training necessary to ensure equal opportunity to jobs directly related to this field? Your 3-minute response, please.
Well, thank you very much. And there's a lot of parts to that question, and there's a lot to be said about it. You know, we've been hearing a lot about the STEM education in our schools, but we need to add arts in there. We need to make sure that it's not just science and technology and math. We need to make sure that the arts is part of it. What I'd like to see done is what we've done in Glendale Unified at the Clark Science Magnet, where they have video production and students are making commercials and they're making short films. When I think of the creative arts in this district, I can think of many things, but one of the most critical parts of the creative economy is the entertainment industry. And we've seen over the years many of these jobs leave. Fortunately, we passed a tax credit that allows us to keep the jobs local, and we need to make sure that that tax credit is not just renewed every time it runs out, but permanent. Because entertainment industry jobs are actually manufacturing jobs. It's something that we create here in California, that we export overseas to places like Asia and Europe, and people still want to consume our products. It's one of the few manufacturing jobs that are still left local. So let's make those tax credits permanent. Let's make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes that we did with the aerospace industry. Let's make sure that we have these high-paying jobs here locally, because it is an economic driving force. In addition to that, we do need to increase the funding for arts education in our schools. I remember when I was a student, I was taking music classes. It was free. Nowadays, parents are forced to sell gift wrap and nuts and have foundation fundraisers simply to pay for the salaries of those teachers that will teach arts in the schools. We need to make sure that we're creative in how we find the funding, and I mentioned in my earlier answer how we could. It's to approach it through a local control aspect, subsidiarity. Problems are best solved at the area that they're closest to. In some areas, arts education may be a high priority, but in other areas, they may have outdated textbooks. Let's give the local schools the resources they need to be able to make the decisions at the level most closest to them as to what their greatest needs are. But in 43rd Assembly District, absolutely. We have a tremendous resource here. The economic driving engine has been the entertainment industry for many years, and we do need to make sure to keep it here. In addition to that, it continues to grow with the advent and the increase and the expansion of the internet. We need to make sure that that industry can cooperate with the entertainment industry and be able to create sustainable jobs. It's one of the reasons why I'm endorsed by the International Alliance of Theater and Stage Employees, the largest entertainment industry union in the state, in the country. And I'm proud to have their support because they know I'll make sure I'll keep creative jobs here in California and make sure I put arts back into our school system.
Thank you. Ms. Friedman, your 2-minute response, please.
Thank you. I love this question. When I ran for city council the first time, I ran on a platform about using the arts as an economic development tool for our area. When I was elected, I was lucky enough to put my plan into place, which involved the San Fernando Corridor, which was one of the city's 2 redevelopment areas, to rebrand that as the city's creative corridor by changing the incentives that we offered to renters and to businesses to bring in and target the creative industry. We did that. It was extremely successful, and now that corridor, which is 750 acres, has the lowest commercial vacancy in all of Glendale and one of the lowest in the entire region because of what we've done to attract the entertainment industry. Now, I spent 20 years as a film producer and an executive in the entertainment industry. I know that industry very, very well. I can be a leader in Sacramento when it comes to the issues surrounding the film industry. Film tax credits are good. They're a good thing to have in place, but they are not going to solve the problem. The international box office now is almost 60% of the box office for any film, and that means that there's more and more of an incentive for film companies to be shooting overseas and using international talent all the way from above the line, from the director and the writer, all the way down to the cast, because they're not just targeting the U.S. market anymore. We have to make sure that we have the most creative people, that we have the best post-production, that we have the best pool of talent to draw on, and the best resources to keep those companies here. Already we see a lot of the jobs, animation, post-production, sound, going overseas because they can do it cheaper. We have to give those companies a real reason to stay here. We also need to tell them that if you're a United States company that's based in the United States, we expect you to keep your job base right here in California and not outsource all of your jobs to India and Pakistan just because it's cheaper to do that. They need to also realize that their box office, still a lot of it's here in America, and if they leave California, it's going to be hugely damaging for our economy.
Thank you. The next question is directed to Ms. Friedman. Rockhaven Sanitarium served women with mild mental and nervous disorders from 1923 until the city of Glendale bought it in 2008 for a historic park. Leadership at the city has changed, and it is now up for sale. It's the only remaining intact sanitarium in the Crescenta Valley, which was once home to many such facilities. If you are elected to the State Assembly, would you work to make Rockhaven a state historic park? Why or why not?
Thank you. Well, as I said earlier, historic preservation was the issue that got me involved in local politics. I spent many years volunteering for the LA Conservancy as the vice chair of the Modern Committee, which deals with post-war resources, and that got me advocating for historic resources all over Los Angeles County. And it was getting involved in historic resources in Glendale when I first moved here in 2000 that got me involved in local politics. So this is very near and dear to my heart. Rockhaven is listed now on the State Register of Historic Places. It's eligible for the National Register. It's an extremely important resource. It's going to be preserved. The question is, are the buildings adaptively reused and used in some other way, or do they become kind of a house museum like we see in Highland Park? And I can tell you that adaptive reuse is, and the reuse of buildings is considered a very high standard of historic preservation. If you think about the historic resources around Los Angeles, whether it's the Bradbury Building, the Tower Records Building, which I was involved in getting listed on the Historic Register, and many others, those buildings were not closed down and turned into museums. They're still used today, and they still have life, and they're still open to the public. So right now, the city of Glendale has issued an RFP to developers to come in to preserve all of those buildings, but to put forward different ideas for adaptively reusing them while keeping them open to the public and accessible, while preserving as much open space as possible, because a lot of what's special about Rockhaven is the feeling of being in the gardens and the feeling of tranquility. And we'll see. We'll see if a developer comes in with something that's of interest some kind of reuse that would keep a public use and preserve those buildings. And if not, then we'll see what can be done next. Now, it was never supposed to be a historic park. I wasn't on council then, but I reviewed the records. Originally, it was purchased because it was under threat of demolition. And the city thought that they could turn it into a library at a time when they thought they had to demolish the Montrose Library to expand the fire station. There's no longer a need to do that, so we don't need to use it as a library. So the question's going to be, what is it going to be used as? I think that we're going to see this play out over the next 6 months or a year as the proposals come in, and the community's talked about a lot of uses that they would like to see. A boutique hotel. There's a historic resource called the Packing House in Anaheim that took an old packing house that's a resource and turned it into kind of a food court, preserving the buildings, but still having the site open to the public to use and enjoy for the next generation of people. So will it become something like that? Or will it end up being just a public park? We'll see. All of those are on the table, and it's going to be up to the city council and the community to decide what the future of Rock Haven is going to be. But believe me, the buildings are going to be preserved. It's listed on the historic register. The city has no intention of demolishing it or to build housing there or anything like that. I think it could be a great resource for the whole community. And you're right, it's a very precious historic site. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kasakian, your 2-minute response, please.
Well, thank you. The property is very special to me because my parents live just a few blocks from there, and I've walked past it many times, and I remember when the city council decided to purchase it for the reasons that Councilwoman Friedman stated. We were supposed to move a library to that location and expand and modernize our fire station at its current location. I don't know why she says that a library is not needed anymore there. I think a library would be a fantastic use, along with a park and other community centers for social services and other needs that the community in the Crescenta Valley would have. I'm surprised the suggestion wasn't to do with it what this council has decided to do with many other precious properties in Glendale. Give it to a billionaire developer and just let them run amok with it. Unfortunately, we need to be very vigilant in this process and make sure that we follow the council's actions and that the use that goes into there is the best use for that community. They're the ones that are going to have to live with it. They're the ones that have been living with it, and it's been mothballed and in cobwebs for the years. And we haven't even been allowing to make any revenue from it. When a couple of studios approached us and said, we want to film at Rock Haven to be able to generate some revenue, just like we've been able to do with our old police station here, we were told that the city does not allow that use. So I would like to see a proposal that absolutely would preserve Rock Haven, preserve the heritage, and make it accessible to the public. And I hope that the public will be engaged in the process to make sure that happens.
Thank you. The next question is directed to Mr. Kasakian. What is your position on the 710 tunnel, which would close the gap to the 210 freeway? Your 3-minute response, please.
I will save you the full 3 minutes and tell you I do not support the 710 tunnel extension. It is an outmoded idea for an outdated era. It was concocted at a time when people thought that they needed a tunnel. I don't think that is the best use of taxpayer dollars. I've been on the record to say that I don't support the 710 tunnel, and that is my answer.
Thank you. Ms. Friedman, your 2-minute response, please.
Well, I've been very public about this over the years, and I've been part of the coalition that has been fighting against the 710. I served for a number of years on what's called the Arroyo Verdugo subregion, which is a council of regional governments that includes Glendale, La Cañada, Flint Ridge, Pasadena, South Pasadena, and Burbank. And one of the major policy goals of that group was to stop the 710 freeway. I've been supportive of funding the multi-city coalition against the 710. I've been supportive of the city of Glendale funding that group to the highest extent that we were asked to. And it would be very, very disruptive to the quality of life of everybody who lives along the 210 freeway. It is, as Mr. Kasakian said, an outdated solution for a transportation problem. We should be looking at moving freight out of the Port of Long Beach, which is a lot of where this traffic is coming from, by rail and not by freeway. The freeway is always going to be disruptive, it's always going to be noisy, it's always going to cause a lot of pollution as those trucks come through. And the worst thing is that the latest studies that have been done show that doing the tunnels the way that they're proposing, which is to not allow trucks at all, does not relieve the pressure of the traffic at the terminus of the 710. A lot of that traffic is going to the college that's there, not moving north up the highway. And with the amount of money that they're going to be charging for the tolls in the tunnels, which they expect to be privately built, it's just not going to give them the traffic relief that that area deserves. What they need are regional, local solutions to deal with the traffic problems that they have. They need a dedicated flyover into the UC school that's nearby. And we need to invest money in rail around California and light rail, not in large highway projects. They're talking now $4 to $5 billion for those tunnels. Imagine what that amount of money would do to our light rail system, to our public transportation system in the region.
Next question is directed to Ms. Friedman. What is your position on Measure B, the Burbank Airport ballot measure, which would replace and reconfigure the terminals, and why?
Well, as a member of the Burbank Airport Authority, which I've sat on for a number of years now, I'm very much in favor of Measure B. The reason that we have to have a new terminal at the Burbank Airport is because we're under an FAA decree to move that terminal out of what they call the runway zone. When you get on the plane at Burbank Airport, everyone loves going outside and boarding the plane, and believe me, we'll let you do that with the new terminal as well. But the difference is that right now you can walk an extra couple of feet and be literally in the runway. And that's just not as safe as it could be. The terminal needs to move away to a distance to where, God forbid, there's an accident and a plane skids off the runway, it doesn't land into another parked jet filled with people, that there's enough of a distance between the runway and the terminal. In addition, the terminal is not friendly to people with disabilities. I've seen them literally have to carry wheelchair-bound passengers up the stairs, which is humiliating to people and really not right in this day and age, because we don't have the room to put a proper ramp to get people from the terminal and onto an airplane. So there's lots of reasons why a new terminal is needed. But the good news for the people of Burbank is that the Airport Authority has given guarantees as part of the agreement that if Measure B passes and the people of Burbank vote for it, from now on, they will now have a supermajority for all manner of important decisions that impact the airport. Things like curfew, any future airport expansion would have to have a supermajority, meaning that the city of Burbank could veto those types of programs. Right now, because of the way that the governance is set up for the airport, Pasadena and Glendale could actually push those things through, even over the objections of the Burbank Airport Commissioners. With the new deal, if Measure B passes, that will forever go away, and the people of Burbank and the Burbank Airport Authority members will be able to veto major decisions that would impact the airport. So it's a good deal for the people of Burbank, and it's certainly important for the traveling public, because they deserve the safest terminal that we can give them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kasakian, your 2-minute response, please.
Well, I'm glad that the council and everyone decided to put the measure on the ballot for the voters of Burbank to decide what's best for them, because they're the ones who are most immediately and most directly affected by any of the changes that happen in Burbank Airport. I think it's important that we collaborate with them, but I think it's taken too long for us to give the Burbank residents the supermajority they need to be able to veto those decisions. And I would say that I support Measure B in terms of an expansion, because we do need an upgrade of that terminal. And I do think it's important for the residents of Burbank to have a say in their city's future, even if we have a joint authority with Pasadena and Glendale over what transpires in that airport location and what happens with the construction of the new terminal. But at the end of the day, I again believe people should have a voice in those issues that most directly affect them, whether we're talking about the 710 tunnel that'll be going through neighborhoods, or whether it's going to be years of construction to build a new terminal for an airport in Burbank right here in our district. I think that Measure B is important. It's long overdue. I've traveled out of that airport many times, and I think it is dated. And we do need to upgrade and make sure our facilities are modern. Hopefully, it'll create some new jobs as well, and we can use the old site for something better.
Thank you. The next question is directed to Mr. Kasakian. Please explain your positions on County Measure A, the park bond, and Measure M, the mass transit bonds. Your 3-minute response, please.
Well, on the park bond, I absolutely support it. I do think that, especially here in the 43rd Assembly District, where we have some of the densest neighborhoods where, people live in apartments but don't have parks that they can walk to, we need to make sure that we have funding available to expand open space, to make sure that we have more green space, to make sure that we don't have this feeling of congestion and claustrophobia that can sometimes occur when living in a highly urbanized area. We've seen that, with the urbanization of our downtown, and I hope that one day the dream of having a cat park project over the 134 freeway will become a reality, so we can have places where families can go and they can play and they can enjoy themselves. It really makes a difference in a person's life to be able to enjoy the outdoors. In terms of transportation and Measure M, I do have certain concerns. I support the measure in concept, but I don't see any of the funds really coming directly to us, especially here in Glendale, to be able to enhance any of our long-term projects. There will be a component of it that will have a designated bus lane like we have in the valley, but we don't have light rail yet. When you go down Glen Oaks or Brand and you see that beautiful green median in the middle of the street, remember that that used to be the light rail line. That used to be the red car. That used to be able to take you all the way to downtown. Now, I've waited 30 years for something to replace that green area that can help move people around more efficiently. Unfortunately, Measure M, which will increase our taxes by a penny, will not do any of that directly for us, at least not in my lifetime, and I can't say it will even do that in my son's lifetime. So I do have my concerns. I support the idea of increasing funding for expanding in the greater Los Angeles area our transportation system. The Metro has been very successful. It has been successful with light rail, but I'd like to see more of that come to this district. And if I'm elected to the legislature with the support of the voters, you can be darn sure that I'm going to fight to make sure every last dollar that we can secure for enhancing transportation in our district comes to this district.
Thank you. Ms. Friedman, your 2-minute response, please.
Thank you. I'm planning on voting for both of those measures, and I was part of passing a resolution at the City of Glendale for the park measure, which I think is very, very important. I've also was a part of appropriating money for the cat park that Mr. Kasahian mentioned, which would be a park over the 134 freeway, creating green space in an area that's desperately park poor, and where the only way that you could really create any parkland of any size would be to take out existing housing, which, for a lot of reasons we really wouldn't want to do right now. Besides the 134 cat park, there's also a proposal which I favor for a cat park over the 101 freeway in Hollywood, which is another area that, even though they're not too far from Griffith Park, for a lot of people, they're in areas that are so dense and that have no place to just walk to take a child to a playground or to take a dog to a dog park. And capping the 101 freeway would provide that, as well as help to clean up the air around there and reduce the impact of a highway that's divided a community right in half that used to be just one community. In terms of transportation, I agree the transportation bond may not be everything that I want, in a box of chocolate, but it's certainly important that we have the financing that we need for Los Angeles as a region to get people out of their cars and get them onto public transportation. What I would like to see for this area, for Glendale, La Cañada, is not just a small trolley kind of going up and down the middle of Brand, but we have to figure out a way to get people with light rail into Hollywood, which is where a lot of people are going to work. And right now, the only way you can do it by public transportation is by taking a Metro bus, which takes a lot of time. Or if we have the new connector, they're going to make you then take the bus to the red line in North Hollywood, and then take the red line into Hollywood from there, which is really kind of out of the way. So the next light rail line that I would like to see would be one going perhaps down Fletcher on that old railroad right-of-way, right in the middle of Fletcher and into Hollywood. Thank you.
The next question is directed first to Ms. Friedman. What specific laws would you support to increase the use of renewable energy in California?
Well, the laws that we have in place right now are fairly aggressive. Fran Pavley, who is the author of the real landmark climate change legislation, which is SB 32, is an endorser of my campaign and been a mentor of mine. And she had climate change legislation last year that was partially passed, which will continue to set the stage for the state having very aggressive renewable energy mandates. But what it didn't do was it didn't force the reduction in gasoline use and increase the mileage requirements for cars. And that's a shame, because we need to not only encourage the use of renewables, but we have to decrease the use of unsustainable fossil fuels at the same time that are polluting our air, that are polluting our oceans whenever there's an oil leak. So we have to be very aggressive in doing this. And the benefit of it is not just in reducing pollution and making sure that we have a sustainable future, it's also in fostering our economy, because what's taking us out of the recession right now is the clean energy sector. Yes, entertainment's important, but it's not the leader right now in California. It's the tech sector and the clean energy sector that are taking us out of the economy. So while it might seem that it's unfriendly to business to mandate strong renewable requirements, on the flip side, it's actually putting money into our economy as we in California are developing the solutions that the rest of the world is wanting to purchase from us to deal with their sustainability problems and their energy problems. So it's something that we absolutely need to do. We need to make sure that the laws are kept in place, that we don't allow the oil industry to come in and force those laws to be weakened. The city of Glendale, like many cities in California, has a very high renewable portfolio. We were at 45% renewables last year, some of it being on the spot market and some of it being permanent energy purchases. And that's really the envy of the rest of the country. There are parts of this country that have 1 or 2% renewables in their portfolio that are using coal for all of their energy. And where California goes, the rest of the country will follow. So we are setting the example here in California, and we have to continue to do that. The cap and trade markets that have been set up are another very good way for us to show that we can encourage renewables in a place where they're not even required by law. So we have the laws in place, we have to make sure that they're maintained, and we have to make sure that now all of the municipalities and all of the businesses follow those laws and really keep up with the renewables that they're required to have.
Thank you. Mr. Kasakian, your 2-minute response, please.
Well, California is a leader in this area, and we have made sure that we take the green economy to the next level in creating jobs and making sure that the air we breathe is clean, the water we drink is clean, and that we have environmental protections in place. But in terms of what laws I'd like to see instituted that can improve on this is to empower local communities, allow it and make it easier for individuals to be able to have solar energy on their houses. There are many communities that make it awfully restrictive for people to put solar panels on their homes or to be able to decide what they do with the energy once they have it. We waste so much energy in the state of California simply moving water around from places where there's abundant amounts of it, or relatively, in this drought, to places where we don't have any of it here in Southern California. One of the things that we can do by investing in solar energy, or even using the rights of ways where we have right of way with solar panels over, for instance, the aqueduct that brings the water from the north to the south, is a very simple way of making sure that we are creating energy, using it efficiently, and using all of the public space that we have that we realistically can use for that, and most importantly, making sure individuals who want to minimize their carbon footprint, who want to do their part, don't have to go through hoops in local municipalities and agencies to be able to have solar energy for themselves.
Thank you. The final question, we'll go first to Mr. Kasakian. What is your position on the DREAM Act for undocumented students, and what should California do about the undocumented students in our schools? Your 3-minute response, please.
Well, the person who wrote the DREAM Act and worked very hard to pass it, Gil Cedillo, now Los Angeles Council member Gil Cedillo, is a friend of mine and a supporter of mine. And I can tell you, as the son of immigrants who came to this country seeking opportunities, I can't begrudge anyone who is trying to find a better life for themselves and secure a better life for their children. When we have children come to California, what else do we expect them to do other than to be the best citizens they can be by going to school and studying hard? Having them go to school to become contributing members of society and then telling them that, we're sorry, you studied hard, you got great grades, but we can't have you now go to a California university or UC, is unjust. So I support the DREAM Act. I support the idea that we can lift up our state by helping everyone, regardless of where they came from. As I said, my parents came to this country to pursue an education, secure a good life for themselves and a brighter future for their children. And I'd like to see that same promise be extended to every child, regardless of where they came from.
Thank you. Ms. Friedman, your response, please.
Thank you, and that's something that Mr. Kasahian and I have in common. I'm also the daughter of an immigrant, and my husband is an immigrant. And I completely agree with what he said. Students who come here, who are living here and study, should have the benefit of that education, and we should encourage that. We need to have in this country comprehensive immigration reform. We need to make it easier for people to have a path to citizenship in America. There are far too many people in this region particularly who work very hard doing some of the hardest, toughest jobs in California, and they're paying into the system. They're paying sales tax, they're paying all of the same taxes that we pay, and they don't get the benefits at the other end. They don't get Social Security. They don't get often health insurance. And they're also ripe for exploitation by employers who pay them off the books and don't pay workers' comp for them, don't pay for their insurance, sometimes commit wage theft. And that's really a shame, and we can do better than that in California. We need to make sure that the people who are living here, who are productive members of our society, have a chance to become citizens and to pay into the system and get the benefits of being American citizens. The DREAM Act is a good starting place. I would like to see us do more in California and to really lead the way and to show this country how we can be humane, how we can be welcoming, and do it in a way that protects people and grows our economy at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. The candidates will now have 2 minutes each for their closing statements. Ms. Friedman, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. It's been a great experience running for Assembly, I'll tell you. I deeply appreciate all the people who have taken the time to talk with me, to tell me about their dreams, about their concerns. I believe that I have the experience and a proven history of leadership to be an effective representative for this community. I've done it, and I've done it by being proactive, by being responsive, and by working with the community on common sense and practical solutions for the problems that we have. I don't make a lot of promises, but I've shown that I know how to work with stakeholders on a whole range of issues. I bring extensive experience in local and regional issues to State Assembly, where I will be a passionate champion, as I always have been, for our neighborhoods and our communities, and a strong advocate for economic development, for good jobs, for great schools, for affordable housing, and for a healthy environment. I'm very honored to have been the top vote getter in the June primary, and to have the strong support of so many people and organizations that I really care about and that show my values. Groups like Planned Parenthood, the Sierra Club, the League of Conservation Voters, our current Assembly member, Mike Gatto, our current State Senator, Carol Liu, now Equality California, which is the largest gay, lesbian, transgender rights organization in the state, and most recently the Humane Society. I'm supported by nurses, by teachers, and by over 45,000 members of our law enforcement community. I want to thank all of you for watching this debate. You're watching because you care about your government, and I deeply appreciate that. I look forward to working with you, and I hope that you will consider voting for me in November. Thank you very much to the League as well.
Thank you. Mr. Kasakian, your closing statement, please.
Well, I want to thank the League for organizing this important forum, and I want to thank my opponent for entering into the arena and participating in what's proven to be a very spirited discussion about issues that are most important to the residents of the 43rd Assembly District. When I first started this campaign, it was for one simple reason: to make sure that the State Assembly District, where I grew up, where I received a fantastic free public education, and where I worked to put myself through college, where I had my first job, and that elected me 3 times to the position of city clerk, that this district and its residents had the same opportunities available to them as my family did when we made this our home over 30 years ago. But in order to restore the promise of a place where people can go to great schools, find jobs, save up to buy a home, we need strong leadership. The type of leadership that doesn't take credit for work of others, that doesn't exaggerate or boast, but one that works with everyone from all walks of life and builds coalitions and consensus. We have enough dividing us as a country and in our communities. I want to focus on the issues that unite us, making sure that people who spend their entire lives working can retire in dignity without having to worry about finding another job in their 70s simply to make ends meet. I want to build a state that won't tolerate a record number of homeless people in America, where students can afford a college education and have the opportunities to study a vocation and provide for their household with fair wages and decent, affordable health care. My experience working with school board members, college board members, and council members across this district has earned me the reputation of someone who can get things done. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the California Teachers Association, the Los Angeles Police Protective League, the California Professional Firefighters, and the California Federation of Labor. I'm proud to be endorsed by leaders like Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Torlakson and State Treasurer John Chung, who stood up to Wells Fargo for their predatory practices, and former Assembly members Paul Krikorian and Dario Fromer, who represented this district in the Assembly. I would be honored to have your vote. For more information on my campaign, visit www.artyforassembly.com.
Thank you very much. That concludes our candidate forum. Our thanks to the candidates and volunteers for your participation in this evening's forum. We are also grateful to Brian Halloran, broadcast coordinator, and his staff for their valuable support in making this event possible. Finally, the League of Women Voters of Glendale Burbank would like to thank both our audience in attendance and those of you at home. Please be sure to vote, whether in person or by mail, so that your ballot is received by November 8th. And remember, on Election Day, it's the votes, not the polls, that count. Thank you and good night.